Stu!
Steve, what's up, man?
Man, nice to see
What's
you in
going
these
on?
plush red leather, real leather
I'm glad
chairs.
you saw the note. I took your advice and took a left at the sheep-goat continuum, and I saw the little note you left about the black on black, so
Yes.
we'd be coordinated. I appreciate
The
that.
sheep-goat continuum, and you're referring to a path here in Germany that is virtually straight uphill except for a diversion where we talked to some sheep.
They were nice. You were correct. If we didn't know they were there, they made their presence known. They said
Yes.
hello.
Yeah.
They said Steve left a message for you.
Wear black to the
Well, and you
interview.
notice they all had white fur.
Yeah, I understand that. So, man, you were just pointing out that we've never really, I mean, we've crossed paths, I don't know, countless times throughout our history. I remember the first time we crossed paths, and that was when I used to teach years ago at BIT. You came in and did an awards presentation. Do you remember you were like the master of ceremonies and I introduced you or something?
Wow. Yeah, we have a history down mine. It was
In a
great.
theater somewhere in Hollywood.
Were you you weren't in the night school thing, were you? The Stanley Clark? Are you on the night school?
No, didn't do that. But I remember, because you've been an inspiration to me as far as getting in front of people. You were so comfortable speaking to this big audience of people, and you were funny, and you were jovial, and yet you communicated well. And I use that as a model now when people, whenever I get nervous and I've got to speak in front of a bunch of people, I really do think back to that. Going,
Well,
man,
you do a good job, and you grew up with a name like Hamm, as I mentioned yesterday. You better be able to turn it on at a dime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most time we've spent together was probably in the basement of the Key Club, talking about what we're going to play for the jam and Bass Player
Yes.
Live.
The Bass Player Live, yes. Where 13 bass players converge and rattle the earth.
And I think we were at Victor's Camp one time. The one time I was there,
We did
you were.
that, yeah.
Man, I remember my favorite BP jam was when they gave Rocco his award.
Oh, I love that.
And it was Squib Cakes. I got asked to play Squib Cakes.
Yeah.
And, about half a dozen bass players who shall remain nameless were setting up and grabbing their seat, who's going to be in front and who's going to be in front here to wait to solo over the CNF.
Right.
And I said, you know what? There's Rocco's amp and there's Garibaldi. How about I stand right in between them?
Yeah.
I mean, I was literally standing in the pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those guys, man, they had Rocco's sound live is so much more like an organ-based thing. There's a lot more subs than what's recorded on the records.
Yeah.
And just being and Garibaldi plays with a much lighter touch. It's a different thing live, and it was, not that I would ready to solo too, but it was just great to hear back and to see how those guys communicated and how they worked the groove.
Yeah.
Souling, I don't think that even entered their lexicon.
Who are some of your other favorite drummers to play with besides David Garibaldi at one time?
Man, I've been, so lucky to play with so many guys, and at this point, writing music is like Ellington did, writing for the band. When I'm writing music, I say, well, I'm going to have Steve Smith play on this track because I know that he can come up with something. Steve is great. I first met Steve doing a record with Richie Kotzen, Richie's first solo record. Great record, one of the poorest recorded records of all time. And we have a real connection. We did those 3 records with Frank and Bolly, the GHS project. So he's great. I've got a guy in the Bay Area named John Mader, who's a kind of a show cat he did the B times 3 tour, right? Which is this little combo I had with Jeff Berlin and Billy Sheehan.
I remember that.
And the hard thing was that we brought out one rhythm section, and there's some cats that wanted to do it, but a lot of guys can play my stuff, whatever funk, whatever that is. But to try to find a guy that can play, grooving high up tempo with Jeff, and they can play convincing double bass drum Shy Boy with Billy.
Yeah.
We're not a lot of guys that could fill that seat. John Mader did it really well.
Right.
Obviously, we were just talking with John Herrera back there. I did a little tour with Greg Howe and Dennis Chambers, and my previous experience with Dennis is I tracked with him on a Tom Costa record, and I was just playing to his tracks. But even doing that, I whipped up I listen back to now, a couple funk licks that I just don't play.
Right.
That aren't in my usual arsenal of, okay, I'm funking this key, I can do this. I'll listen back to it, just somehow reacting to him playing, maybe play differently. And getting a chance to tour and play with him live was
I bet.
was great. And one gig we had a photographer there. We had a great tour. We went to Vladivostok and Tel Aviv and Buenos Aires. I mean, we got to go a long way to get a gig these days. And someone said, "Well, how come you guys aren't smiling?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm listening."
Yeah.
Because playing with Dennis is like walking a tightrope. And you better be competent, you better be listening, and you better, every solo section we would just break it down and try to make something happen. And it wasn't always perfect, but every now and then Dennis will go like this, will go like, "Dude, we found something new. Let's take that, let's run with it."
Yeah.
And lately, man, I've been, for my solo band, I mean, the guys in LA, Joel Taylor, unbelievable, John Ferrara, Bernie Dressel, they're bringing something to the table. But for my solo project, I've been opting for rock drummers lately. I've been using this guy Bobby Rock, and Jeremy Colson, who's this guy that plays with Steve Vai. And I think the difference is that when you're playing straight ahead, it's kind of the bass player that sets the quarter note, and the drummer can kind of weave around it. If you're in fusion, the time is sort of a democracy, and everyone's kind of all in. But when you're playing with these rock drummers, man, it's not that they're listening and not listening and playing off you like Dennis or Joel or something, but they're just playing time. And if I'm trying to play some of my more complicated stuff, if I got a guy that's not trying to cop it with all this stuff up here, it's the same tempo playing with Bobby Rock or Jeremy Colson. For me, playing my hard stuff feels like I'm at half speed. Because they're just laying it down.
Yeah.
There's so much space between the notes. It's like so much easier for me to play some of my stuff. And there's just so much more space. It's like a different vibe. How about you, man? Who do you?
Man, you list all the names of the guys I like. Dressel, I think we were in college together. Joel Taylor is one of the first, played on my first two solo albums.
Guys.
We've done other stuff, and somebody else you mentioned, Ferraro. We were in Larry Carlton's band together and did a bunch of projects. And of course, I love Greg Bissonette because we were in college together as well. And he's one of those guys that can take it anywhere you need to go.
Were you in Miami?
I was at North Texas State first with Greg and Ray Brinker, another great drummer out in L.A., and then and Randy Drake and all those guys. But then I went to University of Miami where I met Bernie. And
That's right, he was there.
yeah, but Dennis, of course, he played on our last Basic Streams album. He's a trip. Guy I love working with is Doane Perry. Have you played with Doane?
I haven't.
He's a drummer from Jethro Tull, and I used to work with him and with John Anderson and some other folks. But he's just one of those guys that can dynamically go anywhere. But I think we both agree that a great Kenny Aronoff. How can I leave Kenny Aronoff out? And
I've actually never played with Kenny. We've done some damage at trade shows in South America, but
and Dorico Watson when we play with Victor or J.D. Blair, they're amazing.
Dorico from
Nashville.
Oh right, but didn't he tour with who's the jammy guitar player?
Mike Stern?
No.
He toured with Stern recently and SMV.
Oh wow.
He did that thing with Stanley and Marcus and Victor, but yeah, I mean, great drummers are like these chairs, they just make life comfortable.
It is, and it's so interesting that, especially with, maybe people don't associate me much with swing, but the Bay Area, I do a bunch of straight ahead gigs, and I have my own little combo that I play, and I belong to this thing called the Bohemian Club, where I end up playing a bunch of strange music. And played with Greg Fields, and especially when in swinging, man, it takes you a minute to find where they feel the beat is.
I used to play with Greg. I love his playing.
And I did a record for Mike Varney that Jeff Richmond wrote. It was a tribute to Jeff Beck, and it was one of the best. I mean, because it had Schofield and Stern and Evan Warren Hayes, and half the record was Simon Phillips, and half the record was Vinnie Colaiuta.
Two of my other favorite drummers.
And
every time you mention somebody,
it's unbelievable. And Simon's kind of listening. I mean, he's got his thing, but we're playing off each other. Vinny, man, the amazing thing about Vinny is that every time we've done maybe half a dozen dates, and whenever he sets up and they go, Rack Tom 1, he hits his drum, I go, wow, that sounds great. I mean, not that I don't think most drummers sound great, but it's not when they hit their drum or their rack toms going, that just sounds good. And I know it's not the drums. I know it's just the way he hits them with his hands. Yeah. But what an experience! I mean, having to, wrestle with those two boys.
Yeah.
For 12 tens.
Was Vinny at Berkeley when you were there?
Vinny wasn't at Berkeley. When I got to Berkeley in '78, and it was wonderful because it was the highlight of this club called Pooh's Pub. And that you could actually stand behind the drums, and it would be full of drummers. When I was there, just leaving was Steve Smith was just leaving and still on the scene. Tommy Campbell was the big guy, and the bass players were Wayne Pedzawater, Tim Landers, myself, Victor Bailey, Baron Brown, and we just kind of keep 2 amps there at Pooh's, and it was kind of a rotating basis. Michaels, I used to go see Stern play there, Randy Ruse on his fretless guitar. I used to stalk Jeff Berlin. Honestly, the first week I was there at Berkeley, I saw Jeff Berlin playing at Michaels. So I had my favorite album of all time, which is Patrick Moran's I, which is this concept solo record that Jeff played on, and band starts at 9 o'clock. I got there at 5, and spent my $2 I had on Cokes and was drinking water, waiting. I didn't know what the gig was. I figured I was so raw coming from Norwich, Vermont, and Champaign, Illinois. I figured they'd get there at 4 and sound check and rehearse. Especially they walked in at 5 to 9, set up and just played. And I had him play, and I remember seeing him play there with Bill Bruford playing standards. And
so he had already been to school there.
He'd been to school. I think he was teaching. He was on his way out.
See, I hear about you guys. I didn't go to Berkeley, but now that I work there, I hear the Stu Hamm legacy from Bruce Gertz and Whit Brown and the guys and John Rapucci, and they talk about you and they talk about Jeff and they Pedswater and of course Tim and all the other.
It's a great legacy, man. I'm so happy for you to have that job, and it means so much to me because when I went there, my first lesson was with Rich, and then and Bruce was kind of a mentor, Rich Appleman, and
former chair, who was there. Actually, funny story is that I wanted to go to Berkeley. I took the correspondence course and I sent him whatever, and then I got a letter back from Rich going, we'd love to have you, but I don't know how much scholarship we can give you, which was cool because I'd gotten chased through the Commons by a homeless person. It was my first experience with a homeless person, so I was scared of a city anyway. But I went.
You didn't walk through the fens?
No. I didn't even know what I was up there on the road with a band at 17 and went into Boston to check it out, and it just scared the heck out of me. But anyway, I ended up going to school further in the South, of course, and where it was warmer. But being up there now, and of course, Rich was there 40 years, all the way through that, and then to be. When he retired, to be taking his job of now 25 bass faculty and 400 bass students is how big was it when you were there?
I mean, I when I went there was sort of before the school kind of got busted that they were taking in money and not putting resources back in. Because when I was there, literally you could get an engineering degree on a 4-track. That was Studio A was a 4-track, and then the corner of Mass Avenue was still a bank. And then, when I first came back, then they bought that out and became the Performance Center. I mean, this was pretty old school. So I can't remember how many bass players, but it's amazing. Michael Mannering was there. Again, Baron Brown, back when he was Barry Brown. But, Rich became a real mentor to me, and I wouldn't say father figure, but he knew my dad. And when my dad retired from the head of the music department at Dartmouth, he donated a lot of his record collection to Berkeley for the the rap, the spinning section and stuff. And Rich counseled me a lot during my career. And I know you're doing a great job up there from what I've heard, and I'm behind you, and I'm so happy for you.
Definitely having
that someone
fun.
with your, is keeping that tradition going, because it's a tradition that means a lot to me and a lot of people. And I know you're just going to kick ass at it, and I'm so happy for you.
Just having fun. That's what we do, right?
That's it,
Life
man.
is about having fun at this point.
Yeah, and
we've done all the hard work.
But the environment, I mean, coming from, I'm sure it's the same. It was just one of the best periods of my life. Coming from, it's like going home, where coming from high school, I had a couple hours a week where I'd play music or whatever. And senior year in high school, I couldn't really care less what was going on. Didn't get good grades. You come to Berkeley, wow, straight A's, because I love everything. I love the Latin ensembles. I met Steve Vai. I'm playing Jeff Beck tunes this night. And I'm meeting cats from around the world.
And all of a sudden, music is your priority, not what you do after you finish your homework, like we did in high school. And sometimes for students, that's a hard paradigm to shift, because they're so used to, let me get all my work done so I can practice. And now I have to remind them, especially the incoming students, that this is your work. Your practice is your work. And then the other stuff behind that. So It's fun to make that shift. I remember when I made it coming out of high school, and all of a sudden, man, I can do music all day.
Man. But what I mean, man, the Rapucci and Witt, man, those names you bring up, and Danny Morris, those cats,
Yeah.
man. Steve Wilkes, I used to be in a band with Steve Wilkes
Wow.
back there in the days.
Yeah. So where you live today?
Well, right now I am back in Southern California. Well, you know exactly where I live. I live by that vacant lot in the
But
corner.
they don't.
We're just going to talk about Santa Monica for a minute.
Yeah.
It's full circle because it's so funny. There used to be a club right there on 11th and Wilshire called At My Place,
Yeah.
which we used to have great bands where I did my first ever solo bass gigs.
Wow.
Where I invited the guys from Relativity Records that put out Steve Vai's Flexible, came down to see me, and I signed my first record deal in that club.
And that you bring up a great point, because people, solo bass is kind of become. There are people now with solo bass careers that have never actually played bass in a band. Thanks to, and that's cool. I'm all for it. But you and Michael Manring, to me, were the pioneers of the art. You guys were hammering it out there when I think when Vic and I were just kind of thinking about it.
Well,
And
y'all are younger. I remember being on tour with Satriani in London, in England, and having Fender fly me back to Virginia Beach to do a bass clinic, and there must have been a 14-year-old Victor right in the front row, right there at that gig. But man, I mean, for me, again, the story was that, man, bass, Abel Boreal says music is pa, and if you don't like the then you shouldn't be a bass player.
Right.
I love me some that is
on the one.
That is the 90% of what I do. And the other part of me as a musician was, I played piano, and Glenn Gould is my muse, and hearing Rostropovich, one person play their instrument, has always been what really excites me. And then my first year at Berkeley, November 8th, 1978, someone gave me a ticket to go see Weather Report.
Yeah.
And
That'll mess you up.
That'll mess you up. I'm coming from high school big band, thinking Maynard Ferguson was cool and Miles played wrong notes.
Yeah.
And my brother had played I Sing the Body Electric, whatever. I thought they were some art band. And we ended up staying out in front of the theater for like 2 hours to just watch them go past. And seriously, what I thought was that if we ever met people from another planet, instead of sending politicians, we should just send that band to say, this is what our civilization is capable of.
Right.
Because they were it was the 830 tour.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen anyone do an unaccompanied bass solo. And then it was like, okay, let's try that. And then I started trying to work on my piano music, playing with, I couldn't do it. A lot of the stuff you couldn't play. I'm playing with Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen and Russian hammer-ons. Okay, slow it down. Look, you can get the notes to come out that way instead of doing this way, which allows me to play something down here and something up here.
Yeah.
And then by just working on specifically like Prelude in C and Gershwin's Prelude No. 2 and a bunch of WC stuff is where I stole everything I play now.
Wow.
A lot of the Children's Corner. And I don't know, it's too... I can't say I feel bad, but it's, you and I have obviously seen a lot of really bad bass solos. That's all technique and all hat and no cowboy, what you could say.
Yeah.
And I just, in our lifetime, I'm a little older than you, in my lifetime, I remember seeing like Larry Graham pop the string like this for the first time. And I certainly wasn't the first guy to tap on a bass or play classical music on the bass, but I was there when it was born and you cut its umbilical cord. And then seeing Les Claypool, seeing Victor take it. Now there's YouTube. This whole genre and technique of bass playing that is sort of old hat to kids by the time they're 8 years old didn't exist when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And there's so much more. And what I hope doesn't get lost is that the best thing about music is just getting with other people, getting with a drummer, guitar player, and having a groove in front of people and enjoying it and have them enjoy you. Because that's what it's all about.
That's the essence of it, It's as we like to put it, a lot of people are involved in the icing on the cake, and they're not that involved and dedicated to the cake itself. And the cake is bass playing as we know it. It's grooving, it's playing with good time and good tone. And then what we eventually did is icing on the cake, and should be icing on the cake.
So it's tone, man. I mean, that's what everyone, they try to play it so quickly. I'm like, dude, let's slow it down. It's because it's music. It should sound good. That's the number one. It's like bacon and eggs. You got bacon and eggs for breakfast. The chicken is involved. The pig's committed.
chicken for breakfast?
Well, if you have bacon and eggs for breakfast,
Yeah.
the chicken is involved, but the pig's
I
committed.
I get it. I
Okay.
get it. Yeah.
All right.
And I guess the pig's involved too. And speaking of pigs, I will speak for myself. We've pigged some time here, I think.
All right,
And
man.
it's about time to go. We'll head back to the hotel.
Yeah.
We'll jam tonight.
We will.
We'll have fun, and we'll say goodbye.
What a pleasure, man.